Alright, this is probably the last tutorial that we have for this course. So let's get us started with the topic of this week, which is the concept of relational databases, namely SQL or SQL as they say. And we will see how it works, and we will see some examples working with database files, querying the database, and probably let's see. Okay. So I do have a file which is a dump of a database file here. This is basically a binary file. It's a file that you can't see inside of that, basically. So if you look at my database panel here, you will see this file named video games. This is basically a database file. So if you look at the name is videogame.db here. If you look at it, videogames.db. Basically this is a dump of a relational database that I have. You can think of a relational database something like a table. A table has rows and has columns, and so you can think of it something like an Excel spreadsheet, let's say. It has some rows, it has some tables, it has some columns, and each column can show some aspect or feature of the data, and each row shows an instance of that data. So you can think of a table of, here in this case we have a table of a video game information, and the information that we have, the columns namely, are ID of that game, name of that game, how dimensions that game have, let's say 2D or 3D, and of course the rating of that game. You will see that in a moment. So I believe that this I think that this dump file, this basically videogames.db file, should be uploaded to the Avenue, or perhaps the instructor has uploaded it, or will do that, or anyways, I guess you can ask me for that file if you want, but this is just a table. You definitely can create a table for yourself and work with that for yourself. Alright, let's see what we have here for the Python. So basically Python ships with a package, with a built-in package called SQLite 3 or SQLite, let's say. This SQLite 3 is a package. It's a built-in package. As you can see, it's within the Python library. So basically it helps you to work with the SQL files. It helps you work with the tables, it helps you work with the databases, relational databases, and namely SQL databases. So what we need to know, what we need to do is to make a connection from our Python program to our database. So database is nothing more than a file or a set of files. It's nothing fancy. Whatever we do with that database is through our code. So basically this code, this Python code, is another file that tries to connect to the other file, which is a database file, right? So yeah, so let's try to connect to that database file from our Python file. How we do that? It's through making a connection, and it's very simple. So videogames.db is the name of the file, and this is the relative address to that file. So that file is in the same directory and the same path as this Python file. So basically what I'm trying to do here is to just connect to that database file and try to execute my commands, my queries, let's say. So from that connection, I can have a cursor. A cursor is like a mouse cursor, you can think of. You can think of the Excel program and the tables that you have there, and your mouse cursor is basically able to go through that rows and columns and then select some parts of it, do some operations with it. So this is basically the same thing. I need a cursor, but this one is definitely different from the mouse cursor. This one helps you to execute queries. Okay, this one helps you to execute queries. Now with that cursor I can execute a query. Let's execute a query. So the concept of query is something like a search query that you give to the Google search engine. Basically when you're on Google, you just write something. You may include some special notations like plus or minus or colon or quote to give the search engine specifically what you want, what you're looking for. That the similar concept also holds true here. So I'm executing a query and telling my database that I want this information from the data that you're holding. So let's see how it works. For now, select name from SQLite master var type equals table. So basically this is a special command. This is not something that you have to deal with quite often. It's just a special command that you need to run in order to get the name of the table. So basically this is a special command that if you run on any database, the result, I hope you can see the console here. Yes, I hope. Yeah. So basically the result of this command, you can run this command on virtually any database. This query will give you the name of the tables that this database is holding. So this database is holding only one database named Mario Games. So yeah, now that we know the name of the table, you might what's the philosophy behind this query that I just executed? It's basically when you don't know what are the table names in the database. So since you don't have probably right now the database file, I executed this command so that you can see what is inside that database. So we know that inside that database there is a table called Mario Games. Alright, let's just comment out this part. Let's execute another command. By the way, in the meantime, you can ask your questions in the chat section. I don't check it very often, but I check it throughout the session. So let's execute another command. Select star from Mario games. So this one is called Mario games. So basically select the star from Mario games is a query that selects everything from this table. So Mario games is the name of the table, is the name of the Excel file we can think of, and this select the star is basically something to help you print out the table, what is in the table, right? So rows of that table are fetched using this command. So C is the cursor. Remember, as so the query doesn't execute until you basically call this method fetch all on it. Okay, so it only executes after you fetch something from it. Somehow lazy, it waits for you until the very last moment that you really and actually need the information. So what I do now that I have the rows, I can just print the rows. For row and rows, just print the row. Right, let's see what happens. So these are basically the rows in that table, right? So this is the first row, this is the second row, there are 11 rows in that table. For the first column you can think of some kind of ID. For the second column you can think of a name. For the third column I spoiled that part for you. This is the dimension that the game has, and this one is a rating. But how do we know? How do we really know that? Unless that we created the database for ourselves, we don't know. So there is a name and there is a way that you can basically find out what are the names of the row of the columns. Sorry. Basically it works like this. So description of 0 for description in so this one should come before this. So see the description. Alright, so this one is a cursor that I'm executing this query upon, and there is a property with this object called description, and description is basically what describes the table. How can we describe a table? Well, we can you can think of it as a schema of the table. How can we describe the table? With the name of the columns. So we may have a lot of rows, but what is really important in terms of the description of the table is the name of the columns, what each column is showing. Alright, so let me just print names and then print the rows. So names is the name of the columns that we have. So basically these are the column names: game ID, game name, dimensions, and rating. So in order to just keep the program efficient, I comment out these sections that I executed previously. So I hope that part is clear. If you have any question, you can ask in the live chat section. But basically what they did here is the query is working upon this table, Mario games, that we now know is the name of the table that this database is holding. And select star from Mario games basically selects everything from that table. It's just like you use your mouse cursor here, like this one. You use your mouse cursor to just select everything in the Excel spreadsheet, let's say. So, and with that object there is a property called description. Description basically describes the table, describes the schema of the table, gives you the schema of the table. The schema of the table is basically the name of the columns, and it could be something else also there, but this table is very simple. It has a row, a special row, let's say. That's the first row, basically. You can think of it as a header of the database, of the table, and the rest are just the information, the actual information. So this is how we access the column names, and this is how we access the rows. All right, I hope this part is clear. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And yeah, we shall continue to the next part. So now we are going to see some actual fetching from the data that's not plain select everything from that table, but rather select something that we care for, select something that we are looking for, basically. And the first application of that is basically alias name. So this column, for example, is just named game. Well, that could be descriptive, but what if I want it as game name, right? I can give an alias to the columns. So basically select game ID as game ID, something like this, and game as game name from Mario games. So you see here, game ID is exactly pointing to this first column here. I wanted with an alias named game ID like this rather than this. And for the game column, which is basically the second column that you see here in the console, I wanted named an alias name game name. Probably you can't see that in Python console, but if you execute this command through your commands line, directly connect to your SQL database, you will see that. But for the concept of alias, I included here, but most probably you can't see that in the Python console. So let me just comment out this part. Let me put the comments here, column names, and put the comments here, table names. So basically, yeah, I selected game ID and game name, so you don't see the dimension and the rating here anymore, because I'm only selecting game ID and game, and I made an I gave them an alias name respectively, game ID and game name. So if it was a console and you were directly connecting to the SQL database, you would probably see that in the header, but here for now we don't see that. But trust me, this is an alias name. Alright, so let's move to the next application that we have, distinct values or distinct keyword. So again, I have my cursor and I execute the command, select distinct. So in order to execute this one, let me just execute this one again, so you remember how the data looked like. So the table looked like this, if you remember, and now we have it in the console. So there are 4 columns and there are 11 rows basically, and these keywords here that are highlighted by my IDE by PyCharm. These are the keywords basically. Select is a keyword, from is a keyword, but Mario games is not a keyword. It's not highlighted in a different color by my IDE. So basically these are keywords, and this one, distinct, is also a keyword. Okay, now in the data I have this first row that shows the column names, and I have these other rows that shows that show the actual data. So for the third column I have dimension here. What are the values that I see for the dimension? So this first one is a game ID, this one is a game name, but this one is a dimension. So I have 2, 2, 2, 1. So this one is interesting, a one-dimensional game. So 1, 2, 3, a three-dimensional game. 3, 3, 3, and 3. So basically I can visually observe here, manually, let's say, that I do have 3 different values, 3 distinct values for dimension. Now what I want to know for a fact is to basically have that observed in my code. So what I do now is I select distinct dimensions from the Mario games. So not only give me the dimensions from the Mario games, but well, I would say only gives me the dimensions, the distinct dimensions, not the whole set of dimensions. So let's see, rows equals c dot fetch all for row in rows, print row. Now let's see what happens. Basically I have the distinct values for dimensions here, which are 2, 1, and 3, as we manually saw in our table. But what if I just remove this keyword? What happens if I remove that keyword? It selects all 11 dimensions that I have for my 11 rows in the table. So the first game was 2-dimensional, second game, the third game as well. These two are 1-dimensional, again the 2-dimensional, and the rest are 3-dimensional. But I will put it back here for the sake of the concept, for the example of this concept, distinct keyword. So it only selects distinct values, which were 2, 1, and 3, right? Well, alright. So, any questions so far? I'm wondering. So, I don't see any question here in the chat section. Let me just, you can ask your questions here if you have any. All right, let's go back to the code here. So yeah, let's move to the next example. Order by. You're probably familiar with this concept of order by if you have used Excel, like more than just a means to keep your data there, but a means to process your data, let's say. Order by is basically some kind of command that you can basically order your database, order your table, your data by a specific column or a set of columns. So if I order by, let's say, the rating, for each rating that I have, I will have the corresponding data for that rating ordered in my output. So let's see that in an example, so that you will have more insight on that. So let's execute this command. Select everything from Mario games, but after selecting everything, just order them by rating. So remember, the rating was a column. Let me show you that again here. So rating is basically the last column of our table. So what I'm saying here, my query is saying select everything from Mario games and order them by rating. So let's see how it works, and then we explain that on the example, like on the output. Alright, so I'm basically now ordering by the rating. So let me also print this part as well, and maybe just print some new lines between them so that we can distinct them. So if you see, the data are not inserted in the order of the rating, they're just inserted in some order, whatever, we don't know. So look at the ratings: 80, 71, 100, 30, 10, 92. There are a bunch of numbers there. Basically these are the numbers out of 100. So the rating out of 100. But so this one is the output of the first command here. I'm just reading through the database without any change in that, without any processing or whatever. Just saying, now let's order them by the rating. Now this would be the result. So you see, the IDs are no longer sorted. So basically what you do when you select a star, select everything from the table without making any change, it is basically ordered by the ID, ordered by the index of the table, if it has any. But if you just use the order by command, it will order by them. So ratings starts from 10, 30, 71, all the way to 100. So this is ascending. I can just say descending. So descending would show them in reverse order. Basically it starts with 100 and all goes all the way down to 10. So probably one-dimensional games are not very satisfiable. So yeah, that was order by. You can order by anything, of course. Order by dimension. If you do that, it will have basically start with from 0 because this one is descending. So from 3 because this one is descending. So first the 3-dimensional games, then the 2-dimensional games, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then 2-dimensional games, and then 1-dimensional games. Alright, doesn't matter. So let's move to the next example. The next example is just an operation on the column. So let's say that these ratings, which are out of 100, I want them out of 10. So rating out of 10. It's basically an example of operations on columns, right? So again, in this example, I want the ratings out of 10. I don't want them out of 100. So select, let's say, game and rating. So remember, the second column was game, which represents the name, and the fourth column was rating, which represents the rating. I just want to select them, but game, I only want the game itself, the column. I don't want it to be changed. But for the rating, I want it to be multiplied by 0.1. So basically, I will have the rating out of 10. I can give it an alias name, it doesn't matter. I can give it an alias name called the stars. So the rating out of 100 could be interpreted as a stars out of 10 or out of 5, whatever. So rows equals c.fetch all, and for row in rows just print row, and let's see what we have here. So basically this time the ratings are out of 10 rather than out of 100. This one is an alias name, you don't have to put it there. It's just the same thing. So yeah, this time the ratings are out of 10. Let's see if I can just put a star here. Well, if whatever you want, you have to put it there. So select game, let's say, well, I want, what was the name of that game ID? I want game ID, game, and rating. I don't want the dimension. But rating, I want it out of 10 rather than out of 100. So yeah, that's basically it. It's an operation that you can do on the columns. So what would be the next example? Let's see another example of order by. Let's see just another example. Select game and yeah, let's say game ID and rating from Mario games, order by rating. So how is this one different from the previous one? So the difference is that in the previous one we selected everything, but in this one we're just selecting 2 columns. Only selecting 2 columns. So I can just put game as well, 3 columns. So let's say I don't want dimensions. I can do that easily using the order by rating. I can say descending. It's totally fine, it doesn't matter. So this was another example. So let's have it again here, and then put some 2 lines. So basically the first one, what I did was that I selected everything from Mario games and then I ordered it by dimensions, let's say in ascending order, right? This one. And now what I do is that I really don't care about the dimension right now, so I want it I only want 3 columns to be selected, namely game ID, game name, and the rating. So here is how I do it. Alright, I hope this example shows the difference of the two. So let's move to the next example, which is I would say total rating, and it's basically operations on columns, the sum operation. Let's say what I want is the sum of the ratings. So what are the sum of the ratings? Well, what is the sum of the ratings that these games have? I can do that easily by executing this query. I will explain it in a moment after I just have it here, run it. So basically what I'm saying is that select the summation, the sum of the ratings that I have in my table. So rating is a column in that table. Rating is a column in this table, and I want the sum of all ratings and only that, and this is the result. So if you remember, there were 11 games, and 11 games will add up to 1100 for the sum of the ratings, but the actual rating that I have, that was the maximum possible rating that I can have, the sum of rating. But what I have here is basically the actual ratings, the sum of the actual ratings, which is nearly 800. So this was another example of operations on columns. Let's see the concept of maximum and minimum. So what I want this time is to select the maximum value of the rating and the minimum value of the rating from the table. So only select the maximum and the minimum values for the ratings and only show that for me. Alright, the maximum value of the ratings is 100, the minimum value of the ratings is 10.2. That was also observable in our table. Well, let's say I think I have this. Yeah, this one is probably good. So if you see here, the maximum value of the rating is 100, the minimum value of the rating is 10.2 from this order by example, and this is exactly what these two functions also give us. So 100 the maximum, the minimum 10.2, right? So any question if you have, you can ask in the chat section. I hope that this one is smooth and straightforward. Let's see another example. Average rating. It's just operations on columns again. So the average rating, let's say select AVG of the rating from Mario games, right? Rows equals C that fetch all, and for row in row just print row, right? So this is basically the average rating among those games, 73 and something. So it's often good to know how many instances are there for this value that we're taking the average of. So let's say that I want to know the number of ratings. How many ratings are there that this value is the average of? So I can also have that by saying count everything, count the number of rows, basically. So the average is 73 point something among 11 games. This could be anything. This could be any column, basically. So the count of ratings, so the count of rows, because in every row we have rating, the count of rating and the count of rows is similar. But let's just keep it relevant and use rating here. And yeah, so this is the average and this is the number of instances that we have, basically. All right, so let's see what we have. Yeah, so let's have a standalone example for count. So the number of rows, the number of games, how many games. So see that execute, select count of game from Mario games. Select, alright. Rows equals see the fetch all, and for each row in rows just print row. Alright, 11. So I can just put the star here. That's the same thing, it doesn't matter. So count the number of everything, count the number of rows, basically everything in terms of rows, or count the number of games, count the number of even dimension, I believe. Dimension, I think was one of the columns. Yeah, so you can just put everything there, as long as you're sure that every row has that value, you can put that. Otherwise, just put the star here. So this was a number of rows. Let's also see a final example. The number of distinct values. So the number of distinct values. So execute, select count distinct dimensions from Mario games. Rows equals, see that fetch all, for row in rows just print row. Alright, I'll explain that in a moment, just let's see for now. So give me the count of not only the dimensions but the distinct dimensions. So if you remember, I think we had that here. So if you remember from our previous example, we had to select distinct dimensions from Mario games, and we observed the fact that there are 3 distinct values for dimensions 2, 1 and 3, as we have it here. Now what I say now is to give me the count of distinct dimensions. So basically this one is just counting how many rows this one returns. So count the number of distinct dimensions, and that's the result, which is 3. Let's run it again, and of course it's 3. Alright, I hope this was clear for you. So we have had yeah, I think 10 or more different examples of how to work with a relational database, of how to work with a SQL database, basically. So you may be wondering what happens if we don't have this video games.db file. If we don't have that, what happens? And the answer to that is that we can create a database for ourselves, but that one is not a challenging part. You can just create a database for yourself. You can do that by using the keyword create table, and then use the keyword insert and start inserting data to your database, to your table. But for the sake of this tutorial, we assume that we have this video games DB, and let's see one more time how does it look. So basically this first command here helps us with having some information about the database. So basically this command just a query to list all tables. So basically, yeah, this one lists all of the tables for you. So in this database there might be, I don't know, tens of tables. We don't know, but what we know for sure is that this query will give us the list of tables, and we shall see here that only one table exists, which is named Mario Games, and I want to know what are the column names in that table. First, I execute this command: select everything from the table Mario Games. Select everything, basically virtually every row. So there is a property called description in the cursor object, if you remember. The cursor object, you can think of your mouse that goes through an Excel database, an Excel spreadsheet, and works with data, select data, manipulate data, stuff like that. So basically this is the name of the columns: game ID, game, dimensions, and rating. And these are the rows. And yeah, these are the rows here. And then after that we had this example of alias. We have well, basically we can just give an alias name to the column name if we don't like it. So game here is not very descriptive. We can change it to an alias named game ID. We can also permanently change that. There exists a query for that, a SQL query for that, but for now we just use an alias. We also saw the distinct values that shows us how many distinct values for the dimensions do we have in our table. And then we saw the example of order by, which basically somehow sorts the data based on a column or set of columns that you give to that. So basically dimensions, or you can just say ratings, or the combination of ratings and dimensions. And then we saw the operation on column. Basically we multiply the column by this value. Then we saw another operation. Well, this one was just order by, but selecting only 3 columns. We saw another operation which was sum. Basically it sums the value for a column that you specify here. We saw the minimum and maximum that returns the minimum and maximum value of the column that you will that you gave to it. We saw the average and count functions again. So these are the keywords basically. So average of the rating alongside with the count of the rating. This one could also be star or it could be rating as it is, doesn't matter, as long as we have rating value for each row in our table, doesn't matter. And the number of rows, well, you just count star, count everything, count every row, and of course the number of distinct values, which we use again this count function upon not only the dimension but also the distinct dimensions. So yeah, and apparently there is no question here in the chat section so far. That's fine. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, there is no question. Maybe we wait 20 seconds if any of you have any question. Otherwise we shall finish this tutorial. All right, no question. Okay, thank you.